So, hi, Lagrange Podcast. I'm Shane,
I'm Glory.
and we're here with
Adam from Barry Tomorrow.
and some questions to say about their upcoming album, Will You Haunt Me with That Same Patience? So, congrats on that, by the way. How do you guys feel about the response to the announcement so far?
Yeah, good. I think it's always such a process for like writing and recording. We always have, bands have the music a long time before anyone else does. So it's always nice to finally get some new music out and announce that there's a new record. And obviously, with that, you hope that there's a good response from people. And yeah, the response so far has been great. So we're just excited to get back on tour and kick the campaign off, really.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well,
Hell
the
yeah.
album rips.
Yes, we got it in
Uh,
advance of it, and it's so fucking good.
Sick. Thank you. That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
hell
I'm
yeah.
curious, you mentioned obviously bands, they'll have music for a minute before it goes out in the world. So I'm curious, can we get like a length of time, rough start time when you guys kind of started writing, and then when you guys had masters in hand? The dates don't have to be exact.
Yeah, it's quite a long time to be honest. So this record was a bit different for us. We started it quite early, I suppose. The idea being we wanted to have a new song at least out like quite quickly. So Seventh Son came out 23.
Yep.
Um, and we were in the studio um, that November
Damn.
doing two new songs.
Mm.
So obviously we started writing before that. So we did Villain Arc and Let Go in November of 23. So yeah, it's pretty wild, but that was because, as I said, we wanted to have a song that came out like, I don't know, maybe a year after the album had come out, just to really keep the momentum. It was something we never really been um, proactive enough to do, I guess. And we just felt super motivated, like with everything that had gone on with the band, like Seventh Son had gone down so well, we felt rejuvenated. And so we didn't really stop writing, I guess. So yeah, we were in the studio and we did those two songs, November 23.
Mm-hmm.
And then we finished writing the rest of it. And then we went in for a week of pre-production in April 24 before we started tracking. I think in like the May, and then we were in and out of the studio. And this is where it's different for us. We've always done this quite kind of traditional way you go into the studio and you're in the studio for a set period of time, however long that is. Normally it's about a month for us. And like, you've written the record before, do a bit of pre-production, then you go in and you're in it and you live it and then you finish. That's like it. Goes off
Yeah.
to be mixed, whatever. For this, we were in and out. And we were going in and out to the studio between touring, which we never normally do.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that our schedule was for us to kind of be able to get the record out when we wanted it, because we were so busy, which is, I guess, a good thing, we were having to go in and out. So we'd done that April. I think we then went out to America with Electric Callboy in the May for some dates. We came back, went straight in the studio. Then we were doing summer festivals all through the summer. We were like in and out. Then we kind of officially wrapped it up. I think it was like September time, maybe.
Mm.
And then, um, yeah, like masters kind of coming shortly after, I guess. But it was a long process for us. And to be honest, it drove us a little bit nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
really glad you guys like it because we were super worried, some of us more than others, about like losing the context of the album where we were
Mhm.
just so in and out. It was almost like I don't even know where we're at with it. We were in the studio at different times. We weren't all there at the same time all the time. So it was a new way of doing things. I don't know if we would choose to do it that way again,
That's fair
but
enough.
Can't blame you.
but it was also cool because we got to like reflect on stuff. So we were able to get some kind of rough bounces and stuff back from Carl, the producer. So we could sit with things a little bit more. So where we would normally be in the studio and you kind of like you do it and then it's done, that's it. We had the chance to kind of go back and forward a little bit more with some bits.
Mm-hmm.
So like for example, Let Go that we'd done in the November, we went back and forward with the chorus of Let Go for a long time afterwards. And the chorus of that song didn't get finalized for another like few months. So that was something that we've never been able to do before. And I think it just meant that we could try and make things even better. So hopefully that kind of comes through in the quality of the record.
Yeah, and by wanting to put songs out like a year after the previous record was out, it allowed you guys to see the fan response to those couple of songs, and I guess in a way determine where the album was going to go based on how people were feeling about what you had put out already.
Yeah, so that was literally the idea, but our
Okay.
schedule ended up not working out quite that well. We wanted to put out a song and then
Mhm.
be like, what do people think? We wanted to put out a really heavy song and kind of test the waters a little bit.
Yeah.
As it was, by the time that song came out, by the time Bill and I came out, we were already kind of well on our way with the record.
Okay.
So we
Mm.
hadn't been able to get it out as quick as we wanted. I think it came out in June of last year, just before we were going on a festival summer run in Europe. But we'd wanted it to come out much earlier than that. And that would have meant that we would have been far earlier in the recording process to be able to like tweak stuff.
Yeah.
But so we were still doing it and we could still gauge the reaction because the record technically wasn't done. But
Hmm.
yeah, what you said there was exactly what we were trying to do.
And just didn't get to
Didn't
do it
quite work out, but
to the full
yeah,
extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Damn. All right. And is there any meaning behind the album title or cover art?
Yeah, so it's a bit different for us again. We wanted to kind of do something a bit different. Obviously, we wanted to push ourselves musically, but we wanted to try something a bit different with the album title, have it be a little bit longer, a little bit more arty. I guess it's a bit weirder. You know, it's not
Yeah.
as snappy as some of our other titles. And with that, we wanted to have art that kind of reflected that as well, that was a bit different, not maybe based around a symbol. That we'd kind of used a lot, which made things easier for us. But originally, the title was just within lyrics. So there's a song on the album called Silence Isn't Helping Us, and the album title was just lyrics initially, which I believe Tom had written. And when we were looking for the title, we kind of saw that and we're like, that's really cool. Um, and I guess it can be interpreted, you know, however people want to in some ways. But for us, it was around kind of the sort of the culture that we live in, like the how instant everything is, how everybody just wants everything straight away, like you know,
Mm.
content or you know, music. The way that people consume things in this day and age is very different, and kind of the the patience aspect of that was kind of intriguing to us. It was kind of just about a bit more reflective, I guess, on that sort of subject and being kind of there's almost like a patience in haunting someone, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that was our initial kind of theme, but yeah, it was brought about by how society has kind of changed and how fast everything is. And I guess, you know, I've summed that up by saying we wanted to get new music out so quickly, you
Yeah.
know, to keep the train rolling because that's
Mm.
the way the industry kind of works. So that was where we kind of came at it from. But I think, as always, the beauty of music, lyrics, and whatever else is, I'm sure people will take their own things from it as well, which is always really rewarding for us. I think ultimately, so long as people connect to it, that's all we care about.
Absolutely. Hell yeah.
100%. That's fair.
So can you tell us a little bit about the writing process for the album?
Yeah, a lot of work. Our writing process is very collaborative, so everyone's very involved. Um, it generally will start off with a musical idea, sometimes even with vocal ideas. So Tom is writing all the time.
Hmm.
And so he might send something across that's just kind of like maybe even like a super electronic kind of base of a track, which he might, you know, have some vocal parts on or just some hooks, or it could be that it comes across in sort of traditional way, like Dorse and Ed that have, you know, demoed out some guitar stuff and, you know, programmed some drums to it and it's just music.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So yeah, kind of, as I said earlier, it started really shortly after the Seventh Son came out. And so we just start firing ideas around and Dan's got a recording set up at home as well. So he'll like, you know, take one of the demos and start to throw some ideas around on top of those. And we just throw things back and forth, but it's very collaborative in the sense that everybody kind of has an opinion on not just their own like lane and their own instrument. You know, I can't play a note on anything else. I can barely play a note on drums, but like, I'll have an opinion on how, I think a vocal might go, or
Yeah.
like how the
Yeah.
guitars should be kind of structured. But there's also that trust, I think, having been with each other for so long, everybody trusts that, each other know what they're doing. So kind of, if I feel like something is best suited like this way from a drum perspective, people will trust me to do that, and I'll trust the guys because they're all amazing at what they do. But yeah, I think since Tom and Ed joined the band, the songwriting process is even more collaborative, because it used to be very much Dorse heavy on the instrumentation. It would start with him, and then you kind of, we chuck the vocals on top of that. But we wouldn't have a great idea of how the song sounded before we went in the studio from a vocal perspective. But now we do a lot of demoing, so we get to play around with a lot of stuff before we actually hit the studio, just to make sure that everything's as good as it can be, and the quality filter is very, very high. So
Good.
we're not kind of afraid to say if something's not maybe quite where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And we're very careful with that, because we want to make sure that every song that we put out on a record, not just singles, is really strong. So yeah, this record was no different.
Gotcha.
And when it comes to speaking up, each of you speaking up, if you're not really feeling a song, are you all typically on the same page with that, or do you
Yeah.
still kind of get into little arguments about that?
No arguments. I mean, look, obviously it can be awkward sometimes if someone really likes something and
For sure.
somebody else really doesn't, but that's kind of rare. There might be some reservations about something, or someone doesn't maybe think it's as good as someone else thinks it is. But it's difficult to have perspective sometimes, depending on what that bit is. And everyone hears things in different ways, which I suppose is the magic, really. Like, one of my favorite melody chorus demos that Tom did, the entire process, never made it on the record.
Damn.
So I sincerely hope it makes it into a song at some point, but you kind of have to, make peace with that. It's not that other people didn't like it. It was just that we couldn't quite get it to fit with what we had written.
Yeah.
And we felt like we were going to compromise a musical section in order to fit it in. So it didn't make the cut. So yeah, sometimes difficult conversations, but we are generally very on the same page. We know what we want to do. We all agree, what kind of sounds good and what doesn't. And it's all for the good of the music, I guess.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So, what song off the album took the longest to write, and which one is your personal favorite?
I think probably Let Go, as I mentioned before, just with the chorus rewrite that we had. That technically was the longest. We went back and forward with that for a while. But I absolutely love that song. I think it came out so well. I would, if I had to pick one at the moment, I'm saying What If I Burn? I think I just think it's a really good song. And obviously a little bit biased, but it's a bit different for us, I suppose. But I'm just really kind of proud of us as a band, I suppose, that we can write a song like that, because it's not particularly heavy. It doesn't really have a breakdown. I think it's just a really strong song. We're pushing ourselves, but it still kind of sounds like us. There's something just really exciting about that, and we were excited about it ever since we heard the first kind of demos for it. Tom vocally on that track was just amazing. As I said, as soon as we heard the demo stuff, we knew it would be special, and it just really, really came together. And it's been a lot of fun to play live as well. So at the moment, I'm gonna say What If I Burn, but I do like all of them.
All right. Hell yeah.
Good.
So how'd the track list for the album come about? Did you guys write the opener be the opener, closer be a closer, shuffle around and see what fits? What was that process like?
Yeah, a little bit. So Dorse often takes the lead on kind of the structure of the record. Obviously, he's very involved in the writing, but he's really into the flow of an album, and it is something we do think long and hard about. But him in particular, he's quite anal about that stuff. So, but I also, me and him share the same kind of opinion around. We're a bit old school. Like, we don't want to release the first track or the last track as any of our singles, because we feel like it's I hate the idea that someone's going to put on our album and be like, well, I've heard that one, so I'll skip to the next.
Oh,
Literally the
yeah.
first song.
Hmm.
And same with the ending. You want the record to take someone on a journey, and that's really
Hmm.
important to us. But if you've already heard this song, not saying everyone does, but like, it doesn't have the same impact. So
Yeah.
we think about that a lot. And yeah, it needs to flow. Needs to make sense one track to the other. We do like to build in some songs that kind of, seamlessly flow into the next. But even the ones that are like a hard stop, it makes sense. So we do think about that, and there is a deliberate writing process, and like that will come up in the demo stage. Like, Dorse could send something across and be like, this sounds like an opener to me, or that sounds like an album
Mm.
closer. So it's in the mind very quickly for us. Yeah.
That's so dope. Okay, we typically don't hear that a lot where it is kind of brought in early into the writing process. Typically, it's like once everything's done, mixed, mastered, and then it's like the final piece of the puzzle is kind of putting it together. So that is really neat. So when you are kind of listening for an opening or a closing track, what do you typically look for? What to you reads as an opener or closer?
um I think it's probably just traditional stuff, really, for the opener. Like, you want to
Mm,
grab someone.
Yeah.
I feel like with me, my preference for an opening song is something that gives a good representation of the album in the first
mm,
track. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I mean, there's so many really heavy bands that start the record with like an instrumental piece. There's no right or wrong way. But I like the first song to really grab people straight away. Um, you know, if they happen to come across the record and just press play and have no idea who we are, like, I want them to get a vibe for it straight away. I want something to happen where they're like, oh, okay, this sounds sick.
yeah.
And then probably for a closer, I think similar, like, a strong song, but we try and write, all of our album tracks being strong, but, maybe a little bit more of a journey, something that's a little
Mm,
bit more out there, something that's got maybe a bit more of an outro. Maybe feels a little bit more like the end of a live show or something like that. Just
mm,
so kind of natural stuff, I guess, nothing too
yeah.
crazy. But yeah, I'm not sure there's many bands that really think about it in the same way anymore. But we are a little bit old, so maybe that's that.
Fair enough. Hell yeah. We respect it because we love a good album listen
Hmm.
here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hell yeah. So would you be
Awesome.
able to tell us where Headspace is at while you're creating the record?
All over the place, really, and that's why it is kind of stressful. Like, we've done a lot of albums now. We've achieved a lot of stuff, and we're very proud. I'm very proud of us for kind of we've never dropped off. We've never written an album that wasn't kind of bigger than the last one. We've never, um, like, one record we're selling this many tickets, and then the next we sell a few less, and then we try and recover it. So it's kind of like, how do we how do we keep going that way.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of stress there as far as this has got to be good, and we take that very seriously. Um, I do listen to some bands who've been around a long time where I'm kind of not really sure. I don't hear that they put the same effort in as they used to, and they may be resting on their laurels and just relying on the records that they used to write. And we're
Hmm.
not like that. So it's very much like, this could all end tomorrow. This has to be really good. And that's why the quality filter being so high for us is really important. Um, but also, trying to progress, trying to think about what worked on the last record. It's not to say that anything necessarily doesn't work or hasn't worked for us previously, but it's really thinking about the stuff that worked, the stuff that really worked live. So we're thinking about playing songs live when we do an album as well. That's important.
Mhm.
We don't really want there to be any songs where it's like, well, obviously we're not going to play that one. We kind of um, and I think if you've got that mindset, then it might be easier to be like, not have the standard so high, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you've got to play it live in front of somebody, you need it to be good. So lots of different things, and it can be really stressful. And that's why it's a big relief to get music out, but obviously to then have people be like, wow, this is really cool. Because yeah, until that point, you're a bit like, I don't know if I've lost all perspective. Is this any good? And you do get to that point. We hear the songs so many times. I mean, from the demo stage to tracking it and, the different mixes or whatever else. I normally get to the point where I've heard everything so much, like I have to take a break from it. And that's normally probably like a couple of months before something comes out. And then I feel like when it comes out, I get like it's a bit fresher for me, and I can enjoy the feedback a little bit more. Because yeah, you do drive yourself a little bit nuts.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
With like, when is it finished? When's it good enough? But yeah, Headspace is all over the place, but it was a fun record to create as well. We had a great time in the studio. It was really relaxed, when we weren't freaking out about stuff.
Gotcha.
Sure. And I take it you're on your break now. You're on your take a little step back from the music right now.
Yeah, now it's out. Like, I'm hearing bits and pieces, and I'll check out. I like watching like the reactions on YouTube and stuff to our songs, so I kind of, listen to it again there. But yeah, I haven't listened to the whole album through in a little bit. But yeah, I'm just enjoying the feedback coming from people, because as I said, it kind of reignites your love for it. You're like, oh yeah, to be fair, that song, that was pretty cool. But as I said, until you get that validation, you're like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah. So how do you recommend your fans to listen to this album for the first time? Should do in the car with friends, in the dark with headphones on? Is a workout album, party album? What do you personally recommend?
Ooh. I wouldn't say a workout album initially, because I feel like you're distracted. So for the first time, you want to have your attention there. I think listening with friends would be cool, especially if they already like the band or they like that sort of music, because I feel like that's a great vibe. I used to love listening to my favorite bands with friends who are also fans. You just kind of vibe off each other and get excited about stuff. So I would recommend that, so long as your friends like either us or this sort of music. If they don't, then maybe don't do that and listen to it by yourself.
You just have to explain why people are yelling the whole time.
Exactly, yeah.
And this one should be super, super quick off the top of your head. I want you to describe this album for new listeners in 3 words. No more, no less.
This is a bit basic, but I'm going to go heavy, melodic, epic.
Hell yeah.
Those are
Hell
good.
yeah.
Describes the album. And in that same train of thought, is there a certain feeling or emotion you want listeners to have while going through the album?
You know what? I actually wrote in our album artwork notes. We've got like a collective thanks. Obviously, we've done a lot of records. Sometimes everyone does their own thanks. We've kind of got to the stage now where those thanks are always like the exact same people. So we've been doing collective thanks for a while. And you'll see, obviously, when the album comes out, if you were to pick it up in the artwork. But I wrote on there that we as a collective just hope that the album makes you feel something. Doesn't really matter what that is, but if it makes you feel something, happy, sad, whatever, because I think that, to me, is us doing our job. If you listen to music and you don't feel anything, like, you're like, no, all right, that's that's not what we want. So I just hope it makes you feel something, and then our work is done.
Fair enough.
Hell yeah, damn straight. And are you able to touch on any particularly challenging or standout moments during the creation of the album, positive or negative?
I think the challenging nature was, as we discussed before, really just being in and out and feeling like you're losing that sight on stuff. Have we got enough of this, enough of that? Is it okay? And just the stress of having to 1 minute be like on the road playing shows or whatever it might be, and then the next you're home and like, I'm in the studio in 2 days. I've got to track drums to a song I've never played to before. That's challenging mentally for me anyway. And I know the guys kind of felt the same, like the in and out, that was difficult. I think the positive, just working with Carl Baum, new producer for us. Obviously, he's the guy behind Sleep Token. So it was very cool for us to get to work with him. He's also worked with Sleeps for a long time. So we've been aware of him. And we were really excited to get to work with him. And as soon as we went in and we did Let Go and Villain Arc, we knew very quickly that we wanted to do the album with him. So it was a really positive experience. Obviously, he knows what he's doing, but when you're creating a record, it's very personal, and that relationship with the producer is really important to us. We don't want to be in the studio with somebody that you don't get along with. It doesn't really matter how it ends up sounding. And that's possible, and you don't really know how you're going to feel about someone until you're in with them. Like, it's not like we were, meeting up with potential producers to see if we liked them personally before committing to going in. You just kind of, the way it works is you just take the plunge, you like their work, you have a quick chat, and then you crack on. But it was good. Like, the tracking process for me, ignoring the stresses that I've mentioned, was a lot of fun. It was the most relaxed tracking experience for a record I've had. So that was really good, because I think, with everything else, if I'd have had a stressful recording process as well, it probably would have tipped me over the edge a little bit. But it was a lot of fun. We just got to try some different stuff. He's super relaxed. Both him and his kind of studio assistant, Jim. Just, yeah, really cool vibe, chilled. So that was the big positive for me, and obviously we'd love to work with him again.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. So for this question, I want to picture you're on tour, you're at a gas station for a rest stop. What is your snack of choice?
Well, I am trying to be healthy. I'm a little bit worried about getting out to America next week, actually.
Oh no.
For that reason.
Yeah.
But also quite excited.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would say probably a peanut M&M. I know that you guys have way more types of M&Ms than we do, so I'm probably going to get all sorts of crazy when we get back out there next week.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I would go with that.
All right. Hell yeah.
Solid classic. And on the topic of food, if the band was a dish, what dish would the band be and why?
I'm not sure I've ever been asked that question.
Hey, there's a
Hell
first time
yeah.
for everything, you know?
That's what we love to
Yeah,
hear.
no, that's perfect. I'm gonna go for a lasagna because
Okay.
I really like lasagna, and there's lots of layers.
hmm
And I think there is now so many layers to our music. I think sometimes it's not immediately obvious. And I think that's why it's really, really important for people to like listen definitely more than once, because each time you pick up like different things. And there's so many little things going on. Even I'm surprised that when we kind of put all of the tracks together, there's some stuff like Tom writes electronically that it's almost not audible when you're listening to it, but when you take it out, it feels different. Like, there's just so much going on with our music now. It's really interesting. It kind of blows my mind a bit, because I'm very simple when it comes to that sort of stuff. But he does a load of crazy stuff with electronics and just like different noises, and we're very much into that kind of ambient sound. So yeah, we kind of started progressing that with Seventh Son, and with this one as well. Like, there's a lot of layers to the music, and I really hope that some people at least kind of hear that when they listen to it a few times, you start picking up different things. But yeah, lasagna for the layers.
All right.
Hell yeah. Wonderful.
And for the last couple questions, going to shift completely away from music and go straight to death row.
Boom.
So if you're on death row, what would your last meal be with a drink?
It would be some form of burger, I think, and I can't right now specify exactly which one, but it would be a big burger. I'm a fan. Drink wise, that's difficult. I'm really into coconut water at the moment, which is a little bit niche, but I feel like I might go with coconut water.
It's so good. Yeah, I mean, it's hydrating.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
with like the bits in it. I'm quite a fan
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
bits. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
All right.
Damn straight. Damn straight. And if you could live in one fictional world for a week, where would you live?
King's Landing. Let's go for that.
King's Landing. What is that? I don't think it's not, I don't recognize it.
From Game of Thrones.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Exist within that world, but specifically King's Landing.
All right.
Gotcha.
And I've done asked the last question. Every single person I've spoken to have said that it is the most important question. What is your favorite color?
I've always said growing up blue, but I am becoming a massive fan of green, but like a deep green, like an emeraldy green, forest green, like a deep green.
Yeah.
That's my thing at the moment. So growing up, it was always blue. I feel like that's a question you get asked a lot when you're growing up. Why is that your favorite color? I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to go for a deep green.
That's good.
Deep green.
All right. So as I said, that's all the questions we have today. Is there anything that you would like to plug?
Well, obviously, I'd like to plug the new album. Will You Haunt Me With That Same Patience out May. We're obviously coming back to America as of next week. We fly out on Tuesday. We're touring with While She Sleeps. A couple of Canadian dates as well. I don't want to miss those guys out. Big fan of Canada. But yeah, traveling around the country for a month. Yeah, come out to a show. We're super excited to get back. It's a place that we really enjoy touring. We haven't done a great deal of it out there over the years. And so the shows are obviously really cool, but we just enjoy traveling around and seeing the country. It's really interesting. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Hell yeah.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank your sound. It's been Adam from Barry Tomorrow, and we have been the Good Noise Podcast.